Hi, and welcome to the Breakthrough Emotional Eating podcast. My name is Kristen Jones, and thank you so much for joining me again this week. Super exciting because we get part two of self sabotage. There was a huge reaction to this part one that I did live in my group. This week's podcast is not being delivered live in the group just because of some issues with Zoom. And so I'm recording this separately, but it was very well received by the members in the Breakthrough Emotional Eating community on Facebook. If you are not a member and you're listening to this on the podcast and you're not a member, you want to come and you want to join us in the community, an amazing place with so many supportive, like minded individuals, women who are working towards managing their emotional eating as well as losing the weight they want, but more importantly, just getting in touch with who they are, understanding themselves better, appreciating themselves, valuing themselves, and really knowing that there is absolutely nothing that they can't do because they are learning to manage their mind, manage their thoughts, in turn, managing their emotions, and then the actions that come from those emotions. And they're getting results that are really paying off for them in the end. So, if you are in need of a place that is able to give you support in your pursuit of managing your emotional eating and losing weight at the same time, would love to have you come and join the group www.facebook.com/groups/food breakthrough. And again, come and join an amazing community on Facebook. So I'm going to jump right in with part two of self-sabotage. So in the first episode last week, if you haven't listened to last week's episode on self-sabotage, you can listen to this in isolation, but I would really strongly recommend that you listen to the previous podcast, part one of the self-sabotage um, series, and really kind of tap into what we talked about. We talked about what what it is, why people do it, what drives people to do it, and what are some forms of self-sabotage. And definitely there were forms of self-sabotage I had never thought of. I had never thought of being late as being a form of self-sabotage, or being a procrastinator, that being a very evident um, form of self-sabotage. And so this week what I really want to now address is some other elements of self-sabotage, but then really look at what do you need to look at when it comes to managing managing your thoughts around reaching your goal and setting goals. We don't ever want to not set goals. It's just part of being a human being, and actually not setting goals is another form of self-sabotage. So setting goals and that could be something as large as buying a house, getting a new job, finding a new partner, to cleaning the house, doing the dishes, making sure that the kids get to school on time. All of those things are all goals. They're all goals. They just have varying degrees of importance in our lives, but they're all equally important. And we need to look at why we're doing them, what we're doing, and how we are supporting ourselves in reaching those goals and not falling into those habits of self-sabotage. So I think one of the most important things that I would want any listener to get from this podcast is that self-sabotage is actually a form. It has its roots in perfectionism. And so there are so many people who say, I'm not a perfectionist because I don't do everything perfectly. Okay, so y'all, being a perfectionist does not mean you do everything perfect, but it does mean that you are driven to feel that you need to do everything perfectly, that everything has to be done in a certain way. And if it's not done in that way, then there is an awful lot of shaming, of ridicule, and of disappointment that you have in yourself. And that causes people, when they feel like they're not going to be able to be successful because it's not perfect, that is what causes people oftentimes to self-sabotage. So according to Brene Brown, one of my favorites, love her, love everything she does. She says, and I quote, perfectionism is a belief that we have to live perfect, we have to look perfect, and we have to I'm sorry, we have to be perfect in order to avoid the pain of judgment, shame, and blame. We use it as a shield to protect ourselves. She also talks about how um, if we feel in any way that we are not going to reach that level of achievement that we have personally set for ourselves, we we want to avoid that pain and that fear that there is going to be judgment from others. And so we just take care of it ourselves. We go ahead and we do it because we're so afraid of other people judging us for what our achievement looks like that we just decide, okay, well, you know what? I'd rather do it myself. I'm going to take care of this myself so I don't have to deal with the judgment from other people. Perfectionism really inhibits success. It is often the path to depression, anxiety, addictions, and paralysis within your entire life. One of the things that I think is so interesting when it comes to self-sabotage and it comes to people actually completing and reaching a goal. And I think this is so interesting because for those of us who are in, and I think it's very, very common even now, but I know especially in my age range. So I'm in my early 50s, and I was raised with this getting tough on yourself was what kind of pulled you out and made you work even harder. And let's tell y'all, that doesn't do it. That is not, that is the absolute antithesis of what you want to do. We do not want to get tough. We do not want to shame ourselves. We don't want to be disappointed. That actually prevents us from taking the first steps in moving towards completing a goal or kind of reanalyzing how we're working towards a goal, because that first step has to involve self-compassion. It has to involve us being kind to ourselves and realizing that there's something going on within us, and it's not about the goal. It's not about how hard we're working. It's about how we're feeling. And so we have to commit to being kind to ourselves. We can't fix ourselves. We have to understand that what we're trying to do is really take care of ourselves, and we have to take care of ourselves in the context of as we're working towards these goals. Again, abuse, beating ourselves up, it's not the answer. It's not the thing that we need to do. um, it does, in that moment, that that shaming, that beating ourselves up, and that self-sabotage does serve a purpose for us, because what it does is it allows us to kind of get a little bit of relief, because when we self-sabotage and it's like, oh, we get to give up that goal. We don't have to work so hard. There's a very temporary relief, like a, oh, okay, that's out of the way. I don't have to deal with that now. But that's very short-lived, because then we start to then consider what we've given up and what we've given up on ourselves and that long-term goal. And that can have much deeper and more long-lasting ramifications for us, in how we feel about ourselves. We we want to allow ourselves to compassionately tell ourselves that what we're thinking around the stress and the the anxiety that we're feeling about working towards those goals, we need to be able to alleviate that and take that away. And that involves being compassionate with yourself. We have to acknowledge that it is our thinking about the goal that is causing us issues. It's not the goal itself. It's not the circumstances of the goal. It's our thoughts about it. That we have to address first. Does that mean that we can't ever change what we're going to work towards? No, we absolutely can change the how we measure the success of our goal or not. But we have to first recognize, we can't just come in and say, oh, I want to change the circumstance because that's going to make me feel better. We have to stop looking to get rid of the discomfort. We have to be able to be okay with the discomfort that we're feeling, but then really look at, why is that there? And it's because of our thoughts about the goal and our thoughts about how we're performing. It's not about the goal itself. And we have to give ourselves that break. We have to be able to understand what the self-sabotage, what need that fills in us. And and then we also have to identify what are those specific thoughts that are tripping us up? What are they? What are the thoughts that are holding us back, that are allowing us to fall into what I consider to be a habit of self-sabotage, a habit of not following through? Because once we do it and we get that relief, and even though it's temporary, we remember when things get hard, oh, wait, I can self sabotage. We don't, and it's not even at a conscious level, but it begins to be a habit. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, because what we really need to do is we really need to be okay with that discomfort and recognize that that is part of the process of working towards a goal. It is not going to be smooth sailing. It is not going to be easy, but we have to remember that it's okay. Life is 50-50, 50% positive emotion, 50% negative emotion. We have to be okay with those negative emotions, because the more we're able to accept that they're going to be present, the less impact they're going to have on us. It's crazy that that would be how it is, but it's so true. When you know something's coming and you know it's going to happen, you're like, okay, there it is. I see it. Now I can relax about it because it's expected. I'm not wearing blinders. I'm not fooling myself into thinking this is going to be super smooth sailing. Um, so again, self-sabotage is a choice that every single person makes, because it's a reaction to how we're feeling. And again, we see it in the short term as a payoff. It has such a huge payoff because it takes the pressure off. It alleviates us, but then it has those long-term ramifications. Um, because it really does create long-term problems for us, because then we start to feel like we can't accomplish a goal. It's because we're not letting ourselves accomplish that goal, and it all originates in our thoughts. So we have to remember that our brain is wired for pleasure. And y'all, when you're working on a goal and something you've never done before, it is never about a whole lot of pleasure. In fact, it's a very, very small amount of pleasure when you get those little goals that you reach, the little tiny steps that you take. Those come few and far between, because when you're trying to do something you've never done, it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's not going to be something that is always going to be pleasurable. And our brain wants to avoid that. Our brain is always looking to avoid that discomfort. And so when we have that discomfort, what do we want to do? We want to self sabotage. Another form of self sabotage, as I mentioned, is not setting goals at all and just saying, oh, that's too hard. I'm not going to do that anymore. And then the other thing that we do, when, because of the way our brain is wired for pleasure, we are always going to be, because we don't want to put ourselves out there. We don't want to risk. And so we're always going to be past focused. Well, you never did that before. So why would you do it now? And the brain is always feeding that to you, because it doesn't want you to change. It doesn't want you to reach those goals, because that's scary. It's new stuff and it's scary. And the brain just doesn't enjoy that. It wants you to be safe. It wants you to be happy. It wants you to be what it considers healthy, which means exactly the same. But as a higher level thinker, you have to allow your prefrontal cortex, which does all of that long term planning, you have to allow that part of your brain to tell the primal brain, no, we don't need to be afraid. We've got this, because that's the only way we grow. But most people go right along with what that primal brain says of, oh, nope, this is uncomfortable. Let's give that up. Let's get that away because we want to be happy. And so that is where we really have to rein that in and say, no, we have to listen to that prefrontal cortex and know that that long-term planning is so, so very important. One of the things that causes that turning towards self-sabotage is, most of us, and I definitely include myself, most of us really question our ability and our belief to be able to reach these new scary goals. And that, if you don't get that belief dialed in and you don't get that under control and you don't get that reined in, the whole process is going to be exponentially harder. And you're probably not ever going to reach the finish line, because your doubts and fears and conclusions about yourself are always going to hold you back. And so you have to be very, very aware of that and really start to put into place things that are going to build you up and they're going to allow you to feel good about yourself. So what happens is when we have those doubts is we then seek to prove to ourselves that we are in fact correct. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, I can't do that. And so we do that and it becomes that habitual thing where, well, I've never done this before. So why do I think I'm going to do it now? And so we just keep sabotaging. We just keep sabotaging. We keep putting all of these obstacles in our way that prevent us from getting to where we need to be. And in the moment, it's so strange that in the moment it feels good to be able to say, "Oh, okay, whew, I'm not even gonna go for that goal anymore and see, I knew I wasn't worthy of it. I knew I couldn't do it. And now I'm right." Well, where does that get you? When does being right, I always like to say, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? And right doesn't always mean happy. And in most cases, it doesn't. If you have that talk of I'm not worthy, I'm not capable, I'm not smart enough, you have to become aware of those things and you have to nip that immediately. You have to start engaging in more affirmations, positive self-talk, your ability to be able to build yourself up from the inside. It is so, so important. So if we're looking for a way, how do we do that? How do we move ourselves away from what I would consider to be the habit of self-sabotage? Because it takes that pressure off. How do we move ourselves away from that? So the most important thing is you need to have a plan. You need to have a plan of how you're going to address the feelings and the emotions that lead to us to self-sabotage and to really again be out of that discomfort and be like, "Ooh, I feel so much better." But then again, has that long-term ramifications. So the first thing you need to do, there's three things I'm going to have you look at. The first one is you need to take control of your ability to manage your emotions. So you have to be aware. What are you feeling? Can you even name the feelings that you're having? Also, if this is something that you notice, like I do this all the time, you need to start paying attention and stopping yourself and saying, wait a minute, oh, I'm doing it again. It's coming. I can feel it. I'm getting uncomfortable. Discomfort does not need to be avoided. We need to lean in to discomfort. And I think most people need to lean into discomfort because that's where the buffering, that's where the eating and the drinking and the drugs and the Facebooking and the online shopping, all of that, we don't want to feel those feelings. So let's avoid them. Let's buffer. Let's do something else so they can't be here. We have to learn how to sit with our feelings, allow our feelings to be there, let them process through, and make it to that next place. So, one of the things that I think is so incredibly interesting, and I was listening to Corinne Crabtree, who is she doesn't know she's a mentor of mine, but she absolutely is. She's amazing. And she was talking, I was listening to her podcast, and she was talking about how if we just sat with our emotions, sat and allowed our emotions to be present for 90 seconds. 90 seconds, y'all. That's it. 90 seconds. If we could sit with our emotions without coming up with 15 other thoughts about why this is so awful, if we just allowed ourselves to sit and be present and feel the emotion in our body, let it be there, let it be uncomfortable, lean into the discomfort. 90 seconds is all it would take. But most people can't last 15 seconds sitting with their emotions. And so it's really important to know that it's going to be a practice. It's going to be something that's going to take time, but allowing yourself to feel those emotions is so incredibly important. How do you sit with a feeling? How do you allow a feeling to be there? It's one of the things that I dive very deep into in my Stop Emotional Overeating bootcamp course is we really do look at like what are the steps to processing emotions? What are the steps to doing that? So the other piece is we need to recognize, and again, I say this all the time. Life is not about always being happy. It is not an Instagram reel. It is not Facebook stories. It's not your Facebook feed. It's reality. Life is 50% positive emotion, 50% negative emotion. That is probably the thing that holds people back the most. And so again, when I say take control of your emotional management, That's recognizing that that is our reality. That is being a human and that's having a human experience. And the more we can embrace that, the more we're going to be able to, again, when those feelings of discomfort come up, we're going to lean into it. We're going to be okay with it. We're going to say, this is part of the process and I'm okay with that. And I believe in myself to know that I can get through this. So again, the more that the more we try to ignore that, the more that self sabotage comes in to allow us to not have to feel those feelings. The second thing is on that same line, we have to accept that we are going to be uncomfortable. Discomfort, growth comes with discomfort. There is nothing good about being in your comfort zone. Being in your comfort zone means you're not growing. The only growth that happens is when we are outside of our comfort zone. We have to venture out and be uncomfortable. And we have to start embracing that. And really, again, leaning into it, letting it happen, and knowing that it's going to take us to that next step. But we have to be able to do that and really be comfortable with that. Um, we all have that need to be comfortable, and that's what our brain wants too. And so your brain, your primal brain wants you to be happy. It wants you to be exactly where you are. So when you start wanting to change, oh my gosh, it will do whatever it can. And that's where the self-sabotage kicks in. So we have to just remember discomfort's part of the deal. Trying to avoid it doesn't get rid of it. It always, and so if we think about it, one of the things that I think is so interesting, and I was listening to someone speak about this, and they were talking about how not showing up for an event, or like making plans with friends and then not showing up, that doesn't that gets rid of the discomfort very, very temporarily, because you decide like, oh, I'm not going to show up. Okay, I'm just going to avoid. I'm not going to call anybody. Or you send that text and you're like, oh, can't make it. Sorry. That just temporarily takes the edge off, but you're eventually going to have to answer to those people. You're going to have to answer to whomever you bail on, whoever you don't show up for. You're going to have to answer to them at some point. So it's just prolonging the discomfort. It's not making it go away. It just prolongs it. So we have to really accept that and realize that we might as well just, again, lean into it and be able to be present there. And the third thing that we need to look at, and this is probably most people's issue, is we as human beings really want to be in control of a situation, of a circumstance. And as we know, circumstances are totally out of our control. So setting a goal, we want to control it. Well, you know what? We can't. We cannot control. We can do certain things, but we cannot control anything outside of ourselves. And that includes the steps that you take to work on a goal. You can't control that. Things are going to happen. Our desire to want to like lock into that and be like, nope, we are in control. That is where we get into trouble. And most of the time we see this in sabotage in relationships, because we, human beings, we decide how we want our partners to act. We decide how we want them to show up, how we want them to be. And when they don't act in the way that we want them to act and they don't show up the way we expect them to show up, then it's like, oh, this is uncomfortable. Okay, what do I do when I'm uncomfortable? I self sabotage. I pick a fight. I decide that I don't necessarily like that tone of voice. I don't like that they didn't bring me something when they came over. Oh, they forgot to do something. End of it. And, let's just walk away. And that's because we want to be in control. And we have to let go of that desire to always be in control, because, again, circumstances outside of us are totally out of our control. We do not get to control those things. Um, so here's the thing about giving up self sabotage. Giving up self sabotage really makes us, it's not one of those like, oh, I'm not going to self sabotage anymore. And then suddenly your life gets so much better. No, because self sabotage is that buffering. And so it gives us that temporary pleasure. Well, if we're not going to self sabotage and we're going to give up that buffering, life is going to get a lot. We're going to get all the feels. We're going to get all sorts of feels, and that's going to be hard. But you know what? That's going to be reality. And that's going to be the human experience. And that's going to allow us to grow and change and believe in ourselves and know that we can do something because we haven't chosen to avoid it. We haven't chosen to run away from it. We haven't chosen to take the quick, easy, I'm going to feel better right now. And I'm going to feel horrible in 2 weeks when I realize, oh my gosh, I've just given up on this thing that I really wanted to work so hard on and I really wanted to achieve. That is not going to get us there. But again, anticipating and knowing that there are going to be obstacles, there are going to be things that are going to make our lives so much better in the long run. We can just ride out that discomfort for 90 seconds. So, an example of that would be if you are trying to lose weight, which the number, most of my members in my group are all about managing emotional eating and wanting to lose weight. So when you give up that eating when you're not hungry or eating when you're eating something that's not on your plan, like a cookie, for example, when you give up that buffering of doing that, then you're going to have to sit with those feelings. You're going to have to, and that's going to be hard. It's going to take practice. But knowing that that's there and committing to yourself and saying, you know what, I know this is going to be challenging and I know this is going to be a practice and I'm going to have to practice doing this. When we commit to ourselves and we show ourselves the ultimate in love, and that means writing something out, even when it gets uncomfortable, because we value and we respect and we care about ourselves so very much. When we do that, that is the ultimate show of our love for ourselves. When we can sit for that 90 seconds and not eat that cookie that we want to have because it's not on our meal plan or because we're really not hungry, but we just need to take the edge off. When we can sit and do that, that is going to propel you so much further in your life in general, not just directing it towards the goal of losing weight, but just honoring yourself, showing yourself personal integrity, showing yourself value. You are going to move yourself in such a huge way. There's nothing that you won't be able to do. And so I really in the scope of looking at weight loss, it's not just about weight loss and it's never just about weight loss. It's never just about not eating that cookie. It's about honoring yourself, who you are, believing in yourself, and showing yourself so much respect and so much value because you are important and who you are does matter. That is what we want to get to. But we have to give up that buffering that becomes the self sabotage to just allow ourselves to lean into that discomfort and know that we are going to come so far. We're going to be so much further ahead when we get there and we allow ourselves to do that. So, a couple of questions. Actually, I have 3 questions that I want you to ask yourself. So, 3 questions when you get into, actually, it's not even when you get into that situation. It's so much better if you do these when you're at a calm, peaceful place. So, 3 questions you want to ask yourself. And I'm a huge proponent of journaling and writing things out because it gets it out of your body. Talking about it is one thing, but really writing it is really, that process is so powerful. So, the first question you want to ask yourself is, what do you believe about yourself that is causing you to self sabotage? So, what do you believe about yourself that is causing you to self sabotage? That's the first thing. Second thing, what is the emotion you are trying to avoid that causes you to self sabotage? What is the emotion? Let's get a little bit more specific. What is the emotion that you feel that causes you to self sabotage? And then we take it that next step back, which is, what are the thoughts about yourself or about your goal? And it's never really about your goal, it's about your ability to reach your goal that creates your desire to self sabotage. Because again, we cannot control those circumstances, but we absolutely 100% can control the thoughts that we have about working towards that goal. Remember, self sabotage is a habit like anything else we do that makes us feel good, whether it's good for us or not. Most of the time, a lot of our habits are not always good for us, but it's really owning and saying, yeah, that habit is not good for me. And I need to start paying attention, cluing in, really figuring out What are my thoughts about myself? What do I believe about myself that's causing me to self-sabotage? What are the emotions that I feel when I want to self-sabotage? And then taking a step back and saying, and what are the thoughts that are leading to those emotions that cause me to want to just move away from that discomfort and give up on myself and give up on my goals. So I hope that this podcast was helpful to help you really see where self sabotage, what it is, why it's there, why we do it. We are trying to protect ourselves, but it's not moving us forward. It is not getting us where we want to be. And it is slowly but surely eating away at your self esteem, your self worth, and your ability to be able to be resilient and to be able to really value yourself to move yourself forward in the best way possible. So I hope this podcast was helpful. And again, if you are a member of the Breakthrough Emotional Eating community on Facebook, thank you so much for being there. I just love my members, love the interactions, love the support and the caring that you all share for each other. Thank you so much for that. I love my Breakthrough membership community as well. Um, amazing individuals that I get to work with a couple of times a week in a much more intimate way. And again, I appreciate all of you and the value that you add to each other, and really that you have really decided that that goal that you're working towards is so important, and you really are committing to working on that. Thank you so much for being a part of that. And if you're listening on the podcast and you're not a member of either one of those communities, definitely would like you to be there. So the breakthrough membership is a closed membership. It will be opening in the second week of June. So I'll be sending out some information. I'll be talking about that on the podcast. Just know that's coming. In the meantime, please come to the free Breakthrough Emotional Eating community. Join the community, be a part of that. You can learn everything that I do in that community as well. And again, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate all the support and the love, and I hope that what I'm providing for you is really valuable. I know that it's valuable to me. It's changed my life, and I want it to change your life as well. So again, thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you all next week.